Thank you. So, thank you all for coming. Today, I'm going to talk to you about some work that's ongoing in Proctor Creek in Atlanta, and we'll talk about where that is and what we're up to. But overall, this narrows the focus in more on a case study of executing some of these ideas about sustainability and what the pros and cons are of these different approaches. As Brian said, I'm adjunct faculty in Warnell, but I'm no longer in Athens, sadly. So if you'd like to get in touch, my email is on the last slide. So Proctor Creek is an ongoing project with a whole lot of folks involved. There's 14 federal agencies at the table. And then in addition to those 14 agencies, I'm working with a team of folks at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers who are delightfully dedicated colleagues that work hard on doing the best they can in this project. I've also benefited from wonderful, thoughtful conversations with my partners at UGA here, as well as with a local stewardship organization, the Proctor Creek Stewardship Council. And this is a citizen-led group that came together unprovoked. They just formed because they saw all of these problems ongoing in this little tiny urban stream in Atlanta. And they said, we've got to do something about it. And in particular, I want to acknowledge Mr. Tony Torrance, who has been an incredibly passionate and insightful counselor and has reshaped my ideas about this watershed, even though we've just met a very few times. So all of that is to say that this is a much, much bigger project than anything I'm going to present today. And I will probably mischaracterize at least parts of it. So when I speak today, I'm only speaking on my behalf, not behalf of my agency, and I'm only reflecting on my experiences in the watershed. And what we're trying to do is this seemingly simple idea. So integrated water resource management is this growing set of buzzwords and ideas that folks are pushing for globally and saying, man, it would be great if we managed water and land as one united resource. Okay, we can all agree on that. And then, wow, it would be wonderful if we integrated economic, social, and ecological outcomes. Whew, sounds good. But to me, this is one of those motherhood and apple pie issues, and that's to say that no one really disagrees that this is what we're trying to do. The question is, how do we do it? How do we overcome the challenges in the real world? Complexities. Who's in charge? Who pays? Who's the decision maker? These are not insignificant outcomes when you're talking about big personalities like agency heads trying to take credit in front of a congressional panel, or a overlapping political jurisdiction and multiple members of the House of Representatives vying for the good things and shunning the bad. So when it comes down to it, what we're trying to do is learn how to do this at a very small scale. And the Urban Waters Federal Partnership is an interagency effort to begin that conversation, not to end it. So at the beginning of the Obama administration, the administration came together and said, goodness, we kind of don't know what we're doing with urban waters. Urban waters are a mess globally, particularly in a few key places in the United States. So they picked 19 of them, and they said, we're going to work on these as case studies, and we're going to learn a lot. We're going to put all the agencies in a room. We're going to figure out who has missions and authorities where, and we're going to try to tackle this in a unified manner. It's not going to be one agency jumping in here, one agency jumping in there. So that's what we've been working on the last few years, is this study site in Atlanta, Georgia, in Proctor Creek. And the basic thesis here is that the opportunities that the federal family can provide extend beyond the resources of any one federal agency. We're trying to rub those nickels together to make quarters, okay? We're trying to find the synergies between our activities, not work in isolation. So Proctor Creek, here we are. This is downtown Atlanta. So Proctor Creek has humble beginnings directly under the federal building, ironically. on the north end of the basin, we have the Atlanta rail yards, a huge expansive complex. On the south end, we have I-20. And on the west end, we have 285. So can you think of a more appropriate example of urbanization than bracketed by downtown, 2 major interstates, and a rail yard? I can't. But Proctor Creek has all of the fascinating and terrible things that come with being an urban system. So pinks and reds are some form of urban intensity or development intensity. I would say most of the basin is experiencing some of that. You also see the typical urban stream syndrome stuff, things like channelization of streams, abandonment of dozens and dozens of apartment complexes in the basement, a terrible, terrible thing going on. And then when you get abandonment, they become dumping sites. Isn't that lovely? Then we have these channelization effects and all of that flashy urban hydrograph inducing channel degradation. And in the back, you can see the industrialization in parts of the basin. Those are big gas tanks. Along with that degradation comes sedimentation, and we have these huge sediment-laden bars and these huge amounts of channel change throughout the system. Layer on top of that, failing infrastructure. These are combined sewers, where when there's no rain, you have the normal sewage outflow, but with combined sewers, when it rains, all the rainwater comes in too, and so you have combined sewage that often overflows into the creeks, or into people's basements, as is often the case in Proctor Creek. Not the greatest thing if you're a resident just trying to make it. So, as I said, what we're trying to do is connecting the agency's capabilities and missions given to us by Congress with needs of the community. So let's take one simple example, something like FEMA. You'd say, FEMA, what do they work on? They work on disasters. So they work on flood management disasters. They have some earthquake authorities, maybe something about building codes. And you say, we're going to cross off the earthquake thing and say that what remains on the list in this basin, we can maybe use FEMA to help with flood management issues. So in this process, the Corps of Engineers was picked to do some ecosystem restoration in the basin. And what we're focused on here is restoring this stream ecosystem. So our southeastern streams have this unbelievably rich biodiversity, and it would be great if our urban stream systems had that same rich biodiversity. So that's what we're overall trying to do. But these projects come hard and fast. So this is a 3-year timeline of a watershed scale restoration study. We have 16 square miles, and the question is, what do we restore, when do we restore it, and how do we restore it? But it all happens fast. So until October of 2015, the Corps of Engineers had no authority to work in the basin. The city signed a cost-sharing agreement. Now we can act. So the first chance our team could get out was December of 2015. 3-year timeline, we lost 2 months before we had even seen the stream. Now, in what remains of this timeline, we lose the second half to technical review. An agency has to write its report, go through the NEPA process, have public input, confer with the other agencies, all of that. So we're just going to assume that last 1.5 years doesn't count. So we have 18 months to execute the project. We lost 2 off the front. Then what remains, we have to screen sites throughout the basin. We have to decide whether we're going to do a little riparian planting here, some channel reshaping there, a fish passage problem here. What are we going to do, and how do we rapidly prioritize those actions? Then we have to move through this process of collecting data that can inform a detailed design. Exactly how many dump trucks of dirt do we have to move to do that? How many plants are we going to buy? How much is all of that going to cost the taxpayer? All of this has to happen on this accelerated timeline. So we're moving as fast as we can, but it's hard to keep up. Often I feel like this is what our leadership is instructing us to do. Is we're stuck in this part here of somehow they imagine that we can do all of this in a very rapid timeline with the greatest science that we can put our hands on. And we are doing our best, but that's not to say that it's easy. So we started our part of this process by saying, well, let's take a step back and look for that vision that Lori alluded to. And we identified 3 overarching goals. One related to ecological health, one related to Proctor Creek as an asset and source of pride for the community, and one as a safe place to work and play. And we started building out those ideas. And in this case, we planned our restoration project around these sub-objectives, but we're keeping an eye on how these affect the community at large and where we can plug in with other agencies and do good things. We went through a process of rapidly screening sites. So initially there were 46 potential reaches of river. We did a whole bunch of ecological modeling to look at, to narrow down to 12 that we think are cost effective, meaning for any given level of taxpayer investment, we get the most ecological benefit, and for any given level of ecological benefit, the taxpayer is paying the least possible. That's what we're trying to do, is cost-effective ecosystem restoration. Now we're going through this process of sharpening the pencil and looking at those 12 sites in more detail, forecasting how we think the ecosystem is going to respond, providing those preliminary engineering designs, and hopefully writing a compelling report that Congress will fund. That Congress will fund, that's the key part. Now, all of this is not, it's not all easy and simple and kumbaya at these federal meetings. It's really challenging. So these are just a few challenges that I see, is that what we're trying to do is balance these notions of being strategic with our investments, but also opportunistic with them. If there's a willing landowner or a cheap, low-hanging fruit that we can pick, let's do it. At the same time, we're trying to avoid tragic outcomes. We're trying to avoid combined sewer overflows. We're trying to avoid water in people's basements. We don't want those things to happen. But when you have a big team, it's hard to figure out who's in charge, who can jump in, when they can jump in. And these aren't insignificant challenges to be overcome. From a local stakeholder standpoint, this project wouldn't exist without the Proctor Creek Stewardship Council in my eyes. Their constant energy and support has been key to this entire process. But the feds aren't always the easiest people to work with, so they've been very patient throughout the process. And then from a lowly researcher perspective, lessons I am personally learning is that we have to use our research to collect pieces of the puzzle, because when these applied problems come along, they're moving so fast that you're barely going to have time to put the puzzle together. And you're going to have to do it blindfolded in the dark as fast as you can. So doing your homework ahead of time and having those good basic research nuggets in place is absolutely crucial. And these decisions are being made with or without that good science, so let's cram as much in as we absolutely can. And I'll make one final point, and that's it. The University of Georgia is incredibly positioned to fulfill these needs and help this community do this. As a land-grant university, there are extension agents in every county. There's an existing network, a history of working with communities. So you're already a leg up in executing your research. So in closing, the future of Proctor Creek remains uncertain. Will we fulfill this vision of integrated water resource management? I certainly hope so, but the federal family and our partners are really working hard to do that. However, like most families, we're a bit dysfunctional. So as Kevin Kershey challenged us this morning, I hope we can accomplish great things through small, courageous actions. And what I'm worrying about sustainable water management is that it's not easy, but we must continue to try. So thank you.